Why did Tuchel think this was the best solution for England? England was certainly never really on top in the semi-final clash against Argentina, but somehow they found themselves 1-0 up with about 35 minutes left to play, and were dealing with Argentina's attacks pretty consistently up to this point. But from that moment Anthony Gordon scored, everything changed for England. They dropped deeper and deeper on the pitch. They changed formation consistently, and allowed players like Messi to very quickly grow into the game, conceding chances from extremely dangerous positions, and ultimately being knocked out as a result. So what was the thought process behind this? Why did Tuchel switch to a back five so early? And ultimately, could he have made other changes to give England more of a chance? Now, there's no denying that the first half didn't really have much of a rhythm, with 0 shots on target and 19 fouls. But it's still important for us to take a look at how both teams approached the game to understand what changed in the second half. In possession, England set up in a 4-2-3-1, and much like we've seen all tournament, these 4 players in the centre here are responsible for building the attack, allowing the fullbacks in Reece James and Jed Spence to get forward on the flanks, with Gordon and Rodgers moving more centrally into the half spaces. When England had the ball in this position, Argentina sat in a 4-5-1 mid-block shape, and they were happy for the centre-backs to hold the ball, but were incredibly aggressive anytime they made a pass forward into midfield. To help progress the ball, Kane and Bellingham would take it in turns to drop into midfield, and a lot of the times Kane attempted this switch in play, but they struggled to make anything happen once the ball was in this position. On the other hand, Argentina had a few more rotations in their setup, which did make their shape a little bit more fluid. On paper, they set up in a 4-4-2, however, they essentially never really resembled this shape. When building the attacks, McAllister would move into midfield, giving Tagliafico essentially all of the left wing to push forward, or combine with Julian Alvarez, who often shifted over to this side. Messi would then hover in the right inside channel, with Simeone stretching the pitch on the right, or even moving more centrally and allowing Molina to overlap. For example, in this snapshot here, we can get a feel for how they wanted to set up, with Messi right in the centre, Simeone moving centrally, allowing Molina to have space on the right, and Tagliafico and Alvarez on the left, with McAllister essentially being a satellite to Messi, hovering in his proximity and trying to give him passing options. From here, the plan was mostly what we've seen all tournament: get the ball to Messi and see if he can make something happen with a ball over the top or through the middle. However, take note of his position here, as there's a big difference in his role in the second half that made all of the difference. But needless to say, both teams struggled to break past the defensive line, and nearly every move broke down in midfield. So it was clear both teams needed to change their approach in the second half if they wanted to get something out of this game. But before we look at that, like many of you, I love travelling for big games. But let's be honest, the airport terminal can sometimes feel like Argentina's midfield, with a lot of people in your personal space, and makes it feel extremely chaotic. But luckily for you, Priority Pass has the solution to make every journey so much more enjoyable. For the longest time, I thought these luxury airport terminals were reserved only for clients with extremely premium credit cards. But I've recently learned that you can purchase a Priority Pass membership directly with no premium credit card required. Priority Pass gives you access to over 1,900 airport lounges and travel experiences worldwide. So whether you're traveling for sports, business, or just a quick leisure getaway, Priority Pass helps elevate every single journey. You get to escape the terminal crowds and enjoy a much more comfortable airport experience before your flight even takes off. So if you're ready to travel like a pro, you can now get 25% off a standard Priority Pass membership. Visit the link in the description down below to learn more about Priority Pass and discover how you can enjoy airport lounge access with absolutely no premium credit card required. Thank you to Priority Pass for sponsoring this video. Okay, so back to the video, and at the start of the second half, it didn't take long for England to break the deadlock. And the goal actually came from a similar pattern that we saw in the first half. Kane drops deep into the midfield to be the extra man, picks up the ball and attempts to play Rodgers in behind. The pass is intercepted and picked up by Rice, who moves it again out wide into Rodgers, who finds Gordon on the back post, sneaking past Molina, who, by the looks of it, had no idea the English winger was there and ready to pounce. But from that moment forward is when the questionable decisions from England started to emerge, and after the goal, England had only 12% possession until the end of the game, and the pressure from Argentina instantly started to mount. Right after the goal, the shape changed completely. We see here after a corner that England are set up essentially in a 6-4. Gordon immediately joined the defensive line to pick up the winger, Rice dropped inside near the centre-backs, and Kane was in line with the rest of the midfielders. This gave Argentina all the control they needed, because with England so deep, there was no way they could press aggressively, and Argentina could gain momentum. At this stage, no substitutions had been made, and I think it was more of an inherent reaction from the players that wanted to protect the lead rather than a tactical instruction from Tuchel to drop that deep. And I think the biggest issue for England in this phase was Rice and Anderson dropping too far into the defensive line. Rice appeared to be extremely concerned with any runners ahead, but by dropping so close to the defense, it meant Kane and Bellingham had to stay deep as well. At one point, in fact, we can see Stones push Rice away as he tries to get into the defense, as there's really no need for him to be in this position. Argentina fired a few warning shots, but generally speaking, this compact shape was doing an okay job at limiting crosses and chances. However, as the game continued, this deep shape remained, and Argentina started to make some positional changes. Firstly, they took off Paredes and brought on the left winger Nico Gonzalez. This meant Argentina kept the two centre-backs and Fernandes as the protection and the tempo givers, while also giving them more balance either side of the pitch, with fullback-winger combinations, and allowing Messi and McAllister to hover in these pockets. Argentina got even closer after a corner, with Messi finding himself out wide and delivering a perfect cross into the box, forcing a save from Pickford. And well, this is when things started to change, and the first big decision was to remove Anthony Gordon for Konsa, with England shifting to a 5-3-2. And Argentina made 3 more subs with Otamendi, Depaul and Montiel. This shape was so deep that England could no longer get close to the players out wide taking the cross. For example, in this position here, with no winger available and Jed Spence staying compact, there is no one ready to apply pressure on Depaul, finding McAllister who hits the post. So Argentina started to hover further and further away from this block. Messi started to move slightly deeper or slightly further out wide, and there was a lack of energy and intensity from England that meant they couldn't get close to these players. From whichever side, these crosses from the pockets were becoming far too easy for Argentina to take. In the post-match interview, Tuchel stated that his decision to switch to a back 5 was specifically down to wanting to stop these crosses, as it's a wider shape that allows you to stay closer to the wingers. The issue was that Argentina weren't really crossing from out wide, but from this more central position. And because there was no way for the midfielders to shift over in time, the responsibility was down to Reece James or Jed Spence. But they were glued to their spot and never got there in time. Eventually, the equaliser came from a corner. Interestingly, Argentina attempted the same corner kick routine 3 times, with Messi playing it short and getting back on the ball in this space here. The other times they looked for the cross. So, naturally, by the 3rd time, England went as compact as possible. But they completely forgot about Fernandes on the edge of the box, who fired home past Pickford from long range. Only a few moments later and the turnaround was complete. Again, because of this decision to remove midfielders and go with extra defenders, they all dropped extremely deep into the defensive line, giving space to McAllister on the edge of the box. His shot bounces off the post. Messi picks up the rebound, cuts onto his right foot and delivers a perfect cross for Martinez to head home. Ultimately, Argentina were the better team on the night and definitely deserved to go through against England. But it felt as if Tuchel went against everything that he stood for at this World Cup. Before the World Cup and during the tournament as well, there was a lot of talk on positive mentality and aggressive offensive football. But when it really mattered, the in-game management led to England getting outplayed and completely pinned into their own box. Personally, the change that seemed to make no sense to anyone was Konsa coming on for Gordon. And I think this is the change that gave Argentina all the confidence they needed to push forward and continue to attack. The problem was that even if England were able to regain possession, there was no outball for them to take a breath. And by removing an attacker, you're not necessarily improving your defense. It's obviously incredibly easy for me to say in hindsight, but the 4-4-2 was giving England more balance. It meant they didn't have to drop as deep, and they could apply more pressure on the players circulating possession. So, in my opinion, a like-for-like substitution would have made more sense. Like Rashford for Gordon, so you have more energy, and the possibility of a counter when you get the ball. But also a defender for another defender if they're tired. But if Tuchel desperately wanted to switch to a back 5, which there's nothing inherently wrong with, I think it's been evident for some time that Declan Rice is dealing with a lot of physical issues. So a defender in his place would still allow England to drop to a 5-4-1, and get closer out wide and give them more energy in key areas. But also maybe a substitution like Mainu could give England the energy they needed in midfield. But obviously this is all speculation and none of us can know what would have happened if some of these substitutions took place. But I'm curious to know what you would have done in this situation. Let me know in the comments down below. Thanks for watching.